Right now, somewhere in your kitchen, there is sugar. Maybe it is obvious. A bag on the counter. A chocolate bar in the drawer. Maybe it is hidden inside something that does not taste sweet at all. A piece of bread. A jar of pasta sauce. A container of flavored yogurt that markets itself as healthy. Sugar is in roughly 70% of all packaged foods sold in the modern world, and most of it is invisible to the people eating it. And here is the part that should make you stop. Your body has never, in the entire history of your species, dealt with sugar the way it is dealing with it right now. This is not a lecture about willpower. This is not a story about discipline or dietary choices. This is the story of what actually happens inside your body, starting from the first hour you stop, going through the first day, the first week, and beyond. It is a story that most people who have ever tried to cut out sugar have lived through without fully understanding why their body responded the way it did. And once you understand the mechanism, you will understand why stopping feels like the hardest thing you have ever done. And then, eventually, why it gets easier in a way that surprises you completely. Let us start at the moment you decide to stop. Nothing dramatic happens immediately. You finish your last meal. You push away from the table. Your body begins its normal process of digestion. And somewhere in that process, the first signals start shifting. Within 30 to 60 minutes of your last sugary meal, your blood glucose level begins to fall. Under normal circumstances, your body manages this drop smoothly. The pancreas adjusts insulin production. The liver releases stored glucose to keep levels stable. The system is elegantly calibrated. But here is the problem. If you have been eating a high-sugar diet for months or years, that system has been running in overdrive. Your cells have been exposed to frequent, large spikes in blood glucose, and over time they have begun to down-regulate their insulin response. The system that was designed for smooth, gentle management has been forced into a pattern of constant emergency response. When the sugar stops, the emergency mode does not immediately know how to switch off. In the first few hours, many people feel fine. There is no crisis yet. The body still has reserves. But somewhere between 2 and 4 hours after your last sugary meal, if your blood glucose has been chronically elevated, the first withdrawal signal arrives. It is mild at first. A vague restlessness. A slight difficulty concentrating. A small but distinct urge to find something sweet. That urge is not psychological. It is neurochemical. A research team led by Eric Stice at the Oregon Research Institute ran a series of brain imaging studies in the mid-2000s that revealed something deeply important. They found that sugar activates the same reward circuitry in the brain as addictive substances. The nucleus accumbens, the dopamine pathways, the opioid receptors. The same structures. The same signals. And critically, the same pattern of habituation. Repeated exposure to sugar desensitizes the reward system. It takes more to produce the same effect. And when the stimulus is removed, the system signals distress. That small, insistent urge you feel a few hours in is the reward circuitry noticing the absence of something it had learned to expect. By the end of the first day, things often get harder before they get easier. Somewhere between 12 and 24 hours in, many people experience what feels like a physical fog. A heaviness behind the eyes. A headache that settles across the forehead or at the base of the skull. Irritability that seems to arrive from nowhere. Fatigue that is out of proportion to the activity level. Some people feel inexplicably anxious. Some feel genuinely low, as if something important is missing. This is not imagination. This is withdrawal. Not metaphorical withdrawal. Real, measurable, neurochemical withdrawal. The headache has a specific cause. Sugar, through its effect on blood. Glucose, and through the release of serotonin it triggers, affects vascular tone. When sugar is removed and blood glucose stabilizes at a lower level, the blood vessels in the brain readjust. This readjustment produces a headache that feels almost identical to a caffeine withdrawal headache. It typically peaks at around 24 to 48 hours and then fades. The fatigue and the fog have a different cause. For people who have been relying on frequent sugar intake as a rapid energy source, the body has partially lost its fluency with fat metabolism. Your cells know how to burn glucose efficiently because you have been providing it constantly. The slower, steadier process of extracting energy from fat, which is the system your body is supposed to use between meals, has become underused. Rusty. The fog is partly the result of your energy systems recalibrating toward a metabolism they have not been asked to run for a long time. By day 2 and 3, most people hit what feels like a wall. The cravings intensify. The mood dips. Sleep may be disrupted. This is the period that causes most people to give up, and it is the period that has nothing to do with weakness and everything to do with a predictable, documented physiological process. Ashley Gearhart, a psychologist at the University of Michigan who developed the Yale Food Addiction Scale, has documented in multiple studies that highly processed sugary foods produce dependency patterns that mirror those of addictive substances. The symptoms people report when they stop eating sugar, the cravings, the mood changes, the sleep disruption, the physical discomfort, map remarkably closely to the withdrawal profiles of substances we do not hesitate to call addictive. The difference is that no one calls it addiction when it is sugar. The packaging still says natural. The advertising still says healthy. But by day 3, something else is also beginning, quietly, underneath the discomfort. Your insulin sensitivity is starting to improve. The cells that had become resistant to insulin signals, numbed by years of chronic elevation, are beginning to restore their responsiveness. This does not feel like anything obvious yet. It is happening at the cellular level, in the quiet chemistry of your tissues. But it is the first sign that the system is beginning to recalibrate. Between days 5 and 7, for most people, the worst is behind them. The headache is gone. The acute cravings, though not vanished, are beginning to soften. The fog starts to lift. And something unexpected starts to emerge in its place. A kind of clarity. A steadiness in energy level that is different in quality from the spike and crash cycle that sugar had been producing. Not the sharp, bright surge of glucose flooding the bloodstream. Something flatter. More sustainable. More, for lack of a better word, even. Many people describe this as feeling more like themselves. As if a low-level static that they had stopped noticing was suddenly gone. This is not a coincidence. Chronic blood glucose fluctuation is associated with mood instability. When those fluctuations reduce, the baseline emotional tone often stabilizes with them. By the end of the second week, something remarkable is happening in your palate. The brain's reward system, which had been calibrated to respond to high concentrations of sugar, is beginning to recalibrate downward. Foods that tasted unremarkably sweet before begin to taste intensely sweet now. A piece of fruit, which once seemed mild compared to the processed sweetness of a chocolate bar or a soft drink, begins to taste genuinely sweet again. The flavor system is rediscovering a sensitivity it had been suppressing. David Kessler, the former commissioner of the United States Food and Drug Administration and the author of research into hyperpalatable foods, describes this recalibration in precise terms. The food industry has engineered products specifically to exceed the natural thresholds of the reward system. When you remove those products and allow the system to rest, the natural thresholds reassert themselves. What was once unremarkable becomes remarkable again. The ordinary becomes satisfying in a way it had not been for years. By the end of the first month, the changes are measurable. Blood glucose levels have stabilized. Insulin sensitivity has improved significantly. Triglycerides, which spike in response to high sugar intake, have often fallen. Inflammatory markers, which chronic sugar consumption elevates over time, have begun to decrease. Liver fat, which accumulates specifically in response to fructose overload, has begun to reduce. None of these changes are visible in a mirror. But they are happening. In the cells of the liver. In the walls of the blood vessels. In the insulin receptors of the muscle tissue. In the mitochondria, the energy-producing structures inside every cell, which have been under chronic metabolic stress and are now beginning to operate more efficiently. And here is the thing that most people who go through this process describe when they look back. It is not that the sugar stopped tasting good. It is that the grip it had on their decision-making loosened. The compulsion softened. The moment-to-moment pull toward sweetness, which had felt as automatic as breathing, began to feel like a choice rather than a drive. The difference between wanting something and needing something, which had blurred completely, began to come back into focus. Your body was never designed for what the modern food environment has been doing to it. It was designed for a world where sweetness was rare, seasonal, and a reliable signal of caloric density in an environment where calories were scarce. Every piece of fruit your ancestors found was a small survival event. The reward response that sugar triggers evolved to motivate the finding of those rare, valuable sources of energy. That response has not changed. The environment has. You are running ancient software in a world designed to exploit it. And every time your hand reaches for something sweet without thinking, the same circuit fires that once drove your ancestors to climb trees for fruit they might not find again for weeks. The moment you stop is the moment you begin to see the circuit. And the moment you see it, for the first time, you have a choice that was not available to you before.